Years ago, in my own parish in Cardiff, I was listening to one of the 6 Benedictines preaching one Sunday morning, and he came out with this: most of us here do not expect to witness a miracle. Years down the line, I can say actually that I'm pleasantly surprised on that one. Miracles do occur. Actually, in our faith, they happen quite a lot. I had with me on retreat a lassie who had been working in the Bronx, actually in Spanish Harlem, and handling people who were down and out, and they only had a certain amount of food to give, but she had an order to only give a small amount to each because there were so many men, but she couldn't have the heart to give them a small bit. So she gambled on the Lord. Not once, but several times. And because the pattern was repeating itself, she decided to note mentally the quantity each time and to calculate mentally what was going on. And yes, it was happening. It was being multiplied in the stock that she had physically until the last one was fed abundantly. When in France in the mid-80s, I was involved with what we had hoped at one point would be a foundation in Wales linked with the Beatitude. Very powerful, very beautiful liturgy, all the gifts, mixed, orthodox, backed by bishops. And I had all kinds of stories when I was with them. The previous year, 1985, there were thousands upon thousands as that year at Ars, and they had gambled also on Providence. They only had a certain amount of food, and the quantity of people was far more than expected. Moreover, there was no fee, only a liberal donation, all in God's hands. But God was honoured, and He honoured them back. They had a certain amount of legs of chicken, and they gave them out. And eventually they noticed they were coming also ex nihilo. They would be multiplied in their hands until the vast number was fed. And so much so that the miracle continued, and they had to distribute to the nursing homes of the area. I could go on and on. But God is real. He zooms into our context, and because He's on side and wants us, He'll do His best to use that context. It's different in the travelling community, it's different in the African community. God, as it were, adapts His grace. One time, we had with us 7 Africans in formation in the monastery in France, or rather the French monastery in Italy, of which I was novice master. And I remember asking one man what happened the other day, because he accidentally mentioned something. What it was this: in his home village, the priest was misbehaving, and the Lord pulled him back, pulled him up this way, in African style, a way they'd understand perfectly. He was celebrating in French, because it's a French country, the sacred mysteries, and when he got to the Eucharistic prayer, he got to the doxology, he was elevating the chalice and the paten. He stopped dead. It was transformed into his hands, into visible flesh and blood. Of course, he made a U-turn with his behavior and became a holy priest. And I asked my friend, who was only 19, the black one, good man, named was Jean, what colour was the flesh? C'était de la chair nègre, he calmly answered. It was Negro flesh. Of course it would be, what else? The Lord identified Himself with His people. This, therefore, is today a sign similar to what the Lord did at Cana of Galilee. Notice that He did it because there was no other means. happens actually in that context, no other means. Frances Hogan was down in Africa for one period, and she was moved by the way that the Eucharist was a real event, a celebration to which people would march on foot for kilometres and kilometres, barefoot actually, in the heat, and they would be shortchanged if they got anything less than 2 hours each celebration. They enjoyed being there and didn't watch what time it was. But because they were there, they then put anything they had with them in a huge pot, cauldron, and made of it food for all. So she observed what was going on. She observed the huge numbers there, huge numbers. And then she began to question what's going on here. There wasn't all that which went into this. They're still drawing it. They're still drawing it. And then, because it was a big centre, there was another celebration. There was at least 3 celebrations that day. And she noticed the same thing each time. And she calmly went to the parish priest afterwards. What's going on here, Father? That was not logical. I could see what was going on. He calmly answered, my dear sister, the Lord gives us every Sunday the bread of life. Is it a big deal that he also multiplies our daily bread? Off he went with himself, quite used to the intervention of the divine. That's our God. The arm of the Lord has never been shortened. This is the Sunday in the Octave of Christian Unity. We pray for our brethren, we ask for our healing. It's a chance to look over our shoulder and to see the wider picture. First, the East. Never forget the East. They're our real brethren, our blood brothers. The same sacramental life flows in their veins. And they honour God. They're not contaminated by haste. 3 hours. 3 hours of peace and interiority, where God has a chance to get through, and man in his humanity doesn't exist. I have a friend who's Romanian, and she said to me, because she knows both sides, sono molto umile, they're very humble. They just disappear in the liturgy. We come nearer home, our Anglican brethren. There too I have contacts, and there too I have respect. My mother had lots of Anglican vocations on her side, wanted to be at one point not to go to Rome, but just to stay halfway as an Anglican. And by the way, when I'd go to where our roots were in mid-Wales, I have to find a Catholic Mass in the middle of nowhere, and at that time we used a very old actually, Anglican church, very old, where one of my ancestors had been a vicar. And it was interesting to see, to compare what was going on there. The Anglicans still had the rood screen and celebrated facing east on the high altar. We Catholics put a table in front of the rood screen and faced the people. Interesting. Newman, of course, was a part of that movement towards bringing things back into a Catholic style, and he wrestled with the problem. And this is what he had to say to High Anglicans. You are a body of yesterday. You are a drop in the ocean of professing Christians. Yet, you would give the law to priest and prophet. And you fancy it a humble office, forsooth, suited to humble men, to testify the very truth of revelation to a fallen generation, or rather to almost a long bi-millenary, which has been in unalleviated traditionary error. And he goes on, you have a mission to teach the national church, which is to teach the British Empire, which is to teach the world. And on he goes to examine the logicality of the branch system, the Anglican Church being a branch of the Catholic Church. You know what tipped the balance with Newman? It was when Parliament, notice Parliament, voted to place a bishop in Jerusalem for all Anglicans and Protestants. Ouch. He knew what that meant. Jerusalem. That means we're not in that succession. We're parallel. My best friend for many years when I was growing up was Paul, who's now a vicar like his father. 6 years in Oxford, he'd take me around. I've told you this before, but some haven't heard it. Listening to one of the high Anglican people there in Oxford, important man actually, Provost of Pusey House, the succession of what goes down to Pusey, Keble, and those who stayed in the Oxford movement and didn't come over with Newman and Manning. So there I was listening to this conversation. I didn't say a thing, just listening. Yeah, Paul. The Anglican Church is a zoo, which every animal can do his own thing, as long as it doesn't get in the way of the animal in the cage next to him. So on they went, Wow. The logical situation of the Anglican Church. Do your own thing, wear what you like, believe what you like and expect the fact will follow. Well, it won't. And I said so in a letter to Paul. He quoted an Anglican theologian in Latin, actually, so I quoted back in Latin to him. Non sufficit credere, oportet et habere. It's not enough to believe. One also has to have. It doesn't change one iota what one thinks. If one is a priest, one consecrates. If one is a bishop, one ordains. If not, nothing at all happens, no matter how big your mitre is. And that's the fact that they won't face. Just recently we've had, coming over, I think the 22nd of December, an Anglican bishop who was chaplain to the Queen, and he wrestled with it for a long time. He's worth listening to because he goes to the real issue. It's very difficult to survive as a high Anglican. And I remember a friend of mine I had who became a Catholic, a monk actually, but he had been an Anglican priest. He's down in Ealing now, Don James. And he was saying to me the feeling he had when he was a high Anglican. It's very uncomfortable now. And all the time you're reading Catholic things, and they're very ones who are telling you you're not a priest. So it's very uncomfortable to sit on the branch on which you're sawing away, doing theology, and you're going to fall off. It's all telling you you're not what you think you are. And so they have what they call leakage. And of course, Benedict XVI has been very hospitable to the leakage, but the leakage is actually very positive, because they come over with a great baggage, which is where I want to land. Do you think that there's no grace, no goodness, no healing in our Protestant brethren worship? It is very much close to God because God again gets into their context and their means of grace. So don't forget that, their means of grace. And they sanctify people within that context. Why? Those who are there and not challenged by further truth and are not challenged by further truth meet God there. I just want to conclude on a personal note. I'm here because something else didn't happen. Because I felt Wales precisely needed something on the level of prayer, a centre of it. I thought maybe something would happen. The contacts are there, the Welsh language, the culture. I knew who could make it happen. The Bishop of Bangor, the Anglican Bishop of Bangor. And he was favourable. He was going to give a centre of prayer, like Taizé, in the heart of the Welsh-speaking area. We were going to just praise and worship God and have cultural sessions based on what we had in common. And Catholic Bishop Edwin Regan was in favour also. He spoke Welsh. Edwin was also boy when I was a young man. And anyway, he then carried on until what happened? Bishop Anthony Crockett, who was only 60, he got cancer. 1 year later, he was dead. And at that point, the question was, will it happen or will it not? The Catholic bishop said no. He couldn't carry on without that. So I applied to Meath, and that's why I ended up here. But this is the point. God probably stopped that. Why? What happens when you're dealing all the time with ecumenical dialogue is this. And I'll try and explain. It's very subtle. One is using terms which have for us a certain sense. Church, and so on. When one is dialoguing with them and praying with them, one is playing a double game. And although it's not obvious, it's actually quite subtle. And bit by bit, this is what is happening. Without saying it, one is saying this as a message globally. It doesn't matter. It does matter! And in this context here in Ireland, at least one can say what is what, with a Catholic audience, without watering it down. And the centre of our life is Him on the altar, surrounded by the angels and the fullness of our faith, unwatered down. So probably, what seemed a desperate no was a resounding yes for divine providence. Because say what you like, the Lord is not free to bless what is not His positive will. To the full, I say. He will do His best because He wants souls. He wants us to love each other, but not at the cost of truth. And this is what Newman saw. I conclude. We have the truth, but we need humility. Because the fullness of truth is not the fullness of sanctity always. And that's where we make a mistake. Humility is small enough to occasionally look over to see if we can learn from some of our brethren, e.g. in the sincerity of their prayer, the care they take in preaching. This, my friends, we need to learn. I just conclude. There are places where actually we meet each other. One is solitude. There we find the whole Christian world in the heart of Jesus. When I was young, I used to frequent Cordy, monastic island in Wales. Nothing comes to my mind, but there one could hear, isolated in the sea, just the sound of prayer. And all the souls, past, present, even in the Celtic church which had been there, beyond time, beyond geography. But what is the bottom line? Getting home. And that's what salvation is about. That's what grace is about. And that's what all the followers of Jesus ultimately are about. So in that line, anyone who gets home, at that point, somehow, is already in